Welcome to the OBR streaming network. This is a brand new edition of The React. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the always fantastic Pete Smith. Follow him on Twitter at _Pete Smith _. What is going on, Pete? We're back into game week here, headed to NOLA for what should be an interesting game. With the Saints, as they got a little bump from their firing of their head coach and hired the special teams coach and then upset the Falcons last week.
Yeah, so one, you hope that they got the sort of little interim bump out of the way, and then they're going to sort of come back down to earth this week, but we'll see. Meanwhile, the Browns are probably the healthiest they've been all year right now, so we'll see if they're able to sort of carry that over and play better football. Certainly, this is something that has been just killing them all year long. And if they can actually get the health situation better and just continuity on the field, then hopefully they can start playing some better football and roll it into a few games. Now, they still have some guys that are injured, obviously, like JOK. But ultimately, I still think they're in a better position than they have been in a while. This is a winnable game, even though it's in a tough environment. So you're hoping they can come out and show improvement and ultimately win football games.
Yeah, clean sheet today, pretty much on the injury report. First time we've seen that all year. Just Batonio limited, everybody else full participants. So, which is what the bye week should do for you. So, as I mentioned, you are watching The React. If you're over on Twitter, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. Hit like and subscribe. We are just 50 or so subscribers away from 5,000. So help us out. Take a second and hit that like button and hit subscribe for us. Make sure you are locked in at the OBR.com as well. We have subscription deals, and you should be subscribed over there and taking in all of that content as well. We're going to start tonight with probably the most recent of stories here, as one of our left tackles, Cleveland Brown, Jedrick Wills, has been talking, probably when he shouldn't have been, about some things, and we're going to examine that here real quickly. Yes, exactly, Auto Wars. And so we're going to watch this video from Sports for CLE with Dave Bacon on Jedrick Wills' business decision.
Also asked some news earlier this week relative to Jedrick Wills. Used the term business decision with the reason he didn't play against the Ravens. Kevin Stefanski addressed that.
I talked to Jed. It was a poor choice of words. I know the connotation of business decision. That's not how he meant it. Did not feel like he was near 100% to help us. But poor choice of words, and he understands that.
That Jed's not healthy a year later? I mean, has it just been, was there a setback?
I wouldn't categorize it as setback. It hasn't recovered how quickly he would want it to, and there's obviously times that you maybe tweak an injury or you feel it again and those type of things. But, yeah, it's been a tough rehab for him.
And Tim, the one thing about Jedrick Wills, when he's healthy, he's probably an average left tackle in the NFL. When he's not healthy, when he's banged up, and I don't mean completely injured, I mean banged up, he's not a good left tackle. And if you can't play banged up in the NFL as a lineman, you probably can't play in the NFL.
Yeah, I think what you said, just, when you say it like that, it makes Joe Thomas's consecutive snap streak all the more remarkable, that you could play through so many, minor tweaks and injuries or whatever, and really not even miss a snap, but still really not even go down in quality as far as the reps were all those years ago. And considering how much more physical the NFL has become, how much faster the game has become, how much bigger, stronger, faster the players have become in the past few years, injuries are inevitable. So if you're not able to just play through that, if you can't play through small nicks and bruises, you're going to have problems. And I think Jedrick Wills, we've seen that struggling to come back from the knee injury. He had those issues I think, with what Kevin Stefanski said about the poor choice of words, I think, certainly like what maybe some people think of business decision compared to what others think of it as, obviously it didn't sound good coming from Jedrick Wills, but it's just a thing with I think you understand that he wasn't 100. I think everybody understands he wasn't 100%, and that's why he didn't play. But at the end of the day, in the NFL, 10 games in a season, nobody's 100%. It's who can play through those, bumps and bruises over the course of a season that tells you who the great players really are. And if the great one.
All right, Pete. This whole saga, I guess my thing is like it could have been avoided completely. Like he didn't have to speak on the situation at all, really. So I'm not, probably business decision wasn't the right verbiage to use. Certainly, because there's a negative connotation that comes with that. But I guess I kind of wonder why he was even talking about it in the first place.
Well, he's not that smart. I mean, honestly, he has often had a problem speaking to the media or just in general when he gets angry or some of these other things he's had any number of sort of unforced errors on this front. So it's what it is. I mean, if it's a business decision, it's a very bad business decision because he's hurting himself, his future. There's no reason to believe he's going to be in Cleveland next year. Zero. And this sort of that was clear. That's been clear, I think, most of this year. I think this sealed it in many ways. So it's hard for me to care that much because I just don't think he's going to be here. I would not be surprised if Jedrick Wills is out of the league in a year or two. I think, I'm sure the frustration he has over the injury is really frustrating and difficult for him, as it would be for anyone when your body is your living. But I also get the sense that Jedrick Wills had whatever whatever a football he's had has been sucked out of him. It's not uncommon with Nick Saban guys. There have been others in this camp, but he just doesn't seem like a guy who loves who's really working that hard. And look, I say that, and there are a ton of players in the NFL who go to work like a lot of people do. It's their job. It's obviously more difficult in the sense that there are guys who do love it and are passionate about it, that are going to outwork some of these guys. But for most people, a lot of players in the NFL, it's just a profession. Now they handle it more professionally than Jed has in some respects. But ultimately, I don't care. And part of this has sort of enabled them to go to what looks like a better path in DeJuan Jones. Now, obviously, with DeJuan Jones, he's got to stay healthy and be able to be on the field, because otherwise you could be right back to Jed, and that would be frustrating. But as long as DeJuan Jones is healthy, he's going to play, and they're not going to go back to this. And I know Kevin Stefanski basically said they're not holding it against him, because I think he's basically going to say, look, he was hurt and couldn't play. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I also think, they may not hold it against him in terms of playing time if one of their tackles gets hurt, but they're going to hold it against him in terms of in the offseason and moving forward. And clearly, if they thought Jedrick Wills was better, they'd put him out there this week, and they don't. So they're moving on.
Which brings me to the question that I posed in my article, things I think I know, just wondering to myself, if he doesn't sit himself down before the Ravens game or pull himself out of potentially starting, do we ever see DeJuan Jones at left tackle this year? And then, from there, now we're in this position where we feel like he's the guy of the future potentially. And there's a tremendous amount of value that comes with finding your long-term left tackle. Would the coaching staff arrived at that without him doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's from my standpoint, this is what I always wanted. So I'm more than happy for this to get out of my way. Right. I wanted DeJuan Jones to ultimately be the left tackle. I think he and Jack Conklin, as they are, is the best setup moving forward. They need to keep adding talent to that position. But ultimately, I think DeJuan Jones can handle left tackle. I think he will be fine there. I'm hoping that beyond getting the shoulder healthy, that just more time to acclimate is going to allow him to be more successful. And, he's a good pass protector. And if he's nothing else, that's fine at left tackle. I would love him to get better at run blocking. Even if he's a mediocre run blocker, there are plenty of great left tackles who suck at run blocking. You can run the other way, and you've got guys to allow you to do that. Jedrick Wills, it has never been better than his rookie year, which is frustrating. He was good as a rookie, has never gotten back to that level, has never sustained any kind of consistency, and we knew that where this was going. So the fact that they had a guy on the roster, allowed them to sort of make this transition, and the Browns can move forward.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder. Obviously he pushed him into the spot by not playing. I just wonder if they would have gotten there on their own.
Yeah, I suspect they would have. Now, here's the thing. This is really bad luck for Jed, obviously. But I will say, in his career, he has played through a significant amount of pain. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever he's dealing, he still played through, even as a rookie, he played through some bad ankle injuries and some other things, and he just stuck it out. And then I think it was his second year when Chris Hubbard went down immediately, and Jedrick Wills had hurt his ankle the first game of the year against the Chiefs, and basically went back out there on what was clearly not a healthy ankle and looked awful, and he played through it. So I don't think Jed lacks toughness. I just think we've gotten to a point where it must be bad and it must be really weighing on him, but also it's just not working, and it's not going to work. And the Browns know it's not going to work. You're not going to pay him average starting left tackle money or whatever you think it's going to be. And they have a guy that's a better path forward. I think they would have gotten here anyway. But fortunately, it has worked out the way it has. And now we get to see what could be a brighter future with DeJuan Jones.
Yeah, it is. It is actually, it's fortunate, right? That it happened like this. I'm glad that it happened like this because you get DeJuan in there and you can start to learn the position and stuff. So, So thank you to Jed for doing that. That was wonderful. All right. So as we proceed here, let's get to the next video. This is Pro Football Talk. This is post Andrew Berry presser with Mike Florio and Rodney Harrison, just kind of reacting to Andrew Berry's thoughts on Deshaun Watson and where the Browns are going.
We mentioned the Deshaun Watson contract earlier and its potential impact on the pursuit of Lamar Jackson or lack thereof. Earlier this week, Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, met with reporters, and he was asked several questions. I've read the full transcript. Several questions about Deshaun Watson, who obviously is out for the year with a torn Achilles. Here's some of what Berry had to say about Deshaun Watson moving forward.
Our focus with Deshaun, I would say for any player with a season-ending injury and a major injury, is first and foremost with the recovery and to make sure that he gets healthy from the Achilles injury. Everything else we'll deal with at a later moment.
Have you assessed how he played, though, before he got hurt?
Yeah, I would say, more broadly, Tom, we didn't play well. We haven't played well as a team, and we haven't played well as a unit on offense. And I think oftentimes when you don't play well on offense, obviously your starting quarterback and your play caller will get the most criticism. But the reality is offense it comes down to organization and synchronization. And there's just a lot of shared ownership across the different position groups in terms of why we didn't perform.
Is there a world in which Deshaun Watson can come back here and play more football for you guys again?
Yeah, I think that's always possible, Mary Kay.
Look, no Browns fan wants to hear that it's possible Deshaun Watson's coming back. The Browns fans are done with Deshaun Watson. And elsewhere in that press conference, Rodney, Andrew Berry was asked, was it a good trade? And, word salad answer. They're never going to admit they made a mistake. They're never going to admit they made a mistake. And I think the problem is they are so intent on not admitting it was a mistake, they're going to keep making bad decisions about Deshaun Watson. So will I rule out the possibility of Watson being the week one starting quarterback for the Browns? No, because they are so stubborn about refusing to admit it was a mistake. I could see them trot him out there. There was another answer from Barry where basically, hey, we love our fans, but we don't care what they think. He didn't say that, but that was the message. We're going to do what's best for the team. And if that means Deshaun Watson playing, Deshaun Watson's going to play.
Do me a favor, put me back on the screen so I can see you, Mike. All right, this is the problem, okay? This is the problem. You have an organization that wants a guy to go out there and play his best football. How can Deshaun Watson play his best football when he's got so much stuff going on off the field? This is the problem. This is what they're not getting. Andrew Berry, you have to understand, he's a young man and he's influenced by what happens off the field. Until you guys get him help, he needs help. You look at all the things that he's gone through with all these massages and all these different cases. The man needs help. He needs some emotional help. He needs mental help. He needs help because I think something's wrong with him. I don't know if he's a sex addict or something, but Mike, he needs some help. That's all I'm saying.
As far as we know, look, and there were allegations. They were never proven in court. The cases were settled. He was suspended by the NFL. There was another lawsuit that was filed right after the first game of the regular season alleging sexual assault, stronger allegations than any of the 20-plus lawsuits from 3 years ago. We don't know where he is from the standpoint of whether or not there are issues from that perspective that need to be resolved. I think it's simpler than that, Rodney. I think it's all that stuff that happened has a toll on your confidence. You know, you're walking out to a stadium with 50, 60, 70,000 people every Sunday, and all those people out there know about the allegations. They know about the suspension. They know. Even if there's never anything he ever does again that could ever get him accused of anything, jaywalking, nothing, lives a model life for the rest of his existence and can never be accused of any wrongdoing by anyone. I think that going through that in 2021 as a young man, still in his 20s, I think that kind of took something away from the swagger you need to have to be a successful quarterback, and he can't get it back.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Mike. How can you go in and be 100% committed to the organization, to your teammates, when you have so many things going on off the field? I've been saying this all year. If I were the Browns and he had all this stuff going on, there's no way I would have allowed him to be in that locker room. I would have told Deshaun Watson, take the year off, go handle your business, make sure that you're secure mentally, emotionally, make sure you take care of your business off the field before I expect you to come on the field. And the simple fact that he's in his 20s, we as grown men in our 50s.
I can't imagine them, Pete, telling him to take the year off at this point. This far into the contract, that would be wild. Mainly this take from Floria that the Browns will compound bad decisions on Watson with more bad decisions on Watson. We kind of talked about how we thought that Barry was very non-committal to Watson in that press conference. I mean, is there anything to what he says about that he could start the beginning of next year or play next year?
No, Florio. I mean, this is what I expect. Get them clicks, because nothing he says makes any sense, which is what I've said all along. All the incentives are for them to go away from Watson. He said himself, what's in the best interest of this team is never, ever, ever seeing Deshaun Watson again. And if you want to say take a year off, this would be the year. This coming year would be the year to take off. Most of what I'm hearing from this video is 3 years old at this point.
Yeah.
They've given him, counseling, all this other crap for years. And if that's still an issue, okay. But here's the thing. No one cares. It's like, even if you're still trying to work in the framework of Deshaun Watson as a quarterback, nobody cares. You made the Faustian bargain of trading all this stuff for a guy, going through all this, all these accusations, everything else, what kind of person, most people believe he is, so on and so forth. They traded for a guy to win football games. Him being a human being has never mattered from that standpoint. He can't win football games. That's it. The rest of this, they're not going to put up with it. It's not worth the headache from a PR standpoint. There's no fixing it at this point. He's going to be coming off another serious leg injury, and it went after he already looked incredibly slow for a guy who is counting on his mobility to help him. He can't process defenses right now. Everything about him slow. So if the Browns want to do right by him from the Josh Gordon element of, we're going to help you as long as you want help in terms of all these other issues. Great. But just like Josh Gordon cannot put him on the football field. It's not reasonable. And just the injury itself is going to make them so they're going to have to move on and go get 3 other quarterbacks. And the fact that Andrew Berry did not come out and say, yes, it means no, clearly. Like, it's possible. You're talking about a guy you're paying, $230 million to and gave up all these draft picks, and your best answer is it's possible, then it's no. And it's never going to be anything else. It's over. And it's always been over. So the idea that they're going to compound mistakes, if they were determined to compound mistakes, they don't trade Amari Cooper. If they were determined to compound mistakes, they don't do some of the other things they've been doing. They are moving on. And it's the only path for them. It's the only thing that makes sense. They're going to have to deal with reality. And I think they're already well past it. I think in some ways, this organization looks at this situation as a blessing for the people who are not, for employees in that building who are never going to say it out loud, like in front of ownership or these other things, but they're basically going to be like, this is the best way this could have ever happened because he's out, he cannot come back, and we are going to be forced to move on. And whatever we put out there is already better than he is, in addition to all the other crap he's going through. They're going to make him disappear. And he's going to probably do as much as he can to make himself disappear. It's the only thing that makes sense. And as with all these things, people get into sunk cost fallacy and crap. There's nothing more important to the Haslams than the dome. And Deshaun Watson hurts you trying to build the dome. His contract, compared to the money they're trying to get out of taxpayers, is not that important. They could lose more money from what they want in that deal of the $1.2 billion, whatever figure it ends up being, is, on its face significantly bigger, basically 5 times the amount. So you're not going to go, oh, I'm really worried about the $230 million investment when it's going to potentially hurt you badly when you're trying to get $1.2 billion. It makes no financial sense. They're not going to do it. They're going to move on.
Yeah, that's what you've been saying for a while. It rings true. So that's what will be the focus for the Haslams as they want to create the dome and Browns world, or whatever they're going to call it down there around it. So more fighting back and forth between the city and a bunch of convoluted mess with all that, but still it seems like that the more the city talks on this topic, Pete, the more it's just them putting up a good face or a good front.
Well, if they don't learn nothing else in the past couple of weeks, the billionaire will win. It's just a matter of how long it will take, and they're going to get what they want. And in this case, it's pretty simple. Why he doesn't want to go to the one he doesn't want. They don't want to build it in downtown Cleveland. You can't make him, so he's going to build, and he's going to build where he wants to build it. And all the rest of this is posturing, and we'll eventually get there. And it's a question of dollars and cents and timelines.
All right, well said. Let's get to this is an interesting video. This is Scott Fisher. It's called "The 2025 QB Class is Complicated." We're going to take a look at the quarterbacks available in the 2025 draft class here tonight in this video. We can stop and talk about some of them and the ones you like, Pete, and kind of break this down. So here we will get a in-depth look at what potentially will be available in the draft at the quarterback position.
And go through how they've done and where I project them to be. The first guy, surprisingly, is Curtis Rourke. Before the season started, I would have never imagined Curtis Rourke being a guy who could be a top 10 quarterback NFL prospect. So coming out of the country of Canada, he was the little brother to Nathan Rourke, who was a superstar for the Bobcats, and Curtis ended up spending half a decade over in Athens, Ohio, putting up big numbers for the Bobcats just like his brother did. For his last year of eligibility, he decided to transfer over to Indiana, and so far in 2024, Rourke has thrown for 2,400 yards with 21 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, and has the second highest QBR in the nation with an 88.6 mark. Rourke has been super efficient, he hasn't made a whole lot of mistakes, and currently his team is 10-0. He has also dealt with a little bit of an injury, and I guess people really see Rourke as a big-time quarterback just because of his accuracy, his touch, his quick release, and his good pocket awareness. He's also athletic enough to escape the pocket, and then add in the fact that he's also 6'5", he's actually a much better prospect than I really thought. If he has a big game against Ohio State, or has a huge game in the playoff, Rourke's stock could really take off, and at least at minimum, he's an intriguing day 3 or day 2 option right now for the draft. One of the more polarizing prospects for the 2025 NFL draft is going to be...
I didn't realize he was 6'5". I also didn't know that he went to Ohio University for all that time. So that's interesting. I spent a number of years there myself. But what are your thoughts on Rourke as a prospect? Do you see him as a potential guy that teams will have interest in day 2 of the draft, or no?
I can't speak to what other teams will think. I can only talk what I think. I have no interest in Curtis Rourke. He's 24 years old. That's immediately done for me because and he's got the starts I want. Has enough playing experience. The issue I have is where do you take him, because he's being 24 and where the Browns are in terms of their quarterback process. DTR is basically just under a year older than he is. So if you're going to, let's say let's just use Jameis Winston as the proxy for the veteran that they're going to have. So you have Jameis Winston, you have DTR, and you have Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke has to be able to be okay pretty quickly for you to care about it. Otherwise, you're going to sit there and go, why do I care that I have, because if you're then drafting somebody else, unless you're moving on from DTR, which I suppose is possible, but all signs point to DTR is capable of being the long-term backup. So if you're not getting somebody with starter traits, or what you believe are starter traits, they would have to show themselves pretty quickly. I don't see the point in getting a Curtis Rourke. I'm not saying it's impossible, but my question would be, where do you draft that? And to me, that's late day 3 or undrafted. I suspect somebody will take him earlier than that. But from my standpoint, that makes no sense for the Browns.
Yeah, agreed. World's fastest fat man with it says, serious question. I thought age guidelines did not apply to quarterback. Is that true? The guardrails?
I can't speak to the Browns guardrails, just mine. And 24 to me is where you get into trouble. The success rates, quarterback is in general. I want experience, which is, we're going to talk about that as we go. I want guys who played a ton of football in college, but 24 is where you start to see results go downhill the other side. There comes a point when there's a reason they are still in college at that point and have not been able to be super successful. It's great what he's doing at Indiana, but I'm not sitting here going, man, that guy looks like a guy who's going to start a whole lot of Sundays. Maybe that's, and I'm happy for some other team or Curtis Rourke to prove me wrong. It's just in general, that's the age where I look at you after the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. Drew is saying, if DTR is the long-term backup, why not play him now? Well, because Jameis Winston is potentially your short-term starter, or it could be. And you want to find that out. So
you need to know what you're doing with Jameis Winston, because if the answer is, well, we're going to let him go in the offseason and get somebody else, fine, make that decision and then go to DTR. But if they're still sitting there going, we're not sure what we want to do with Jameis Winston, you need to play until you have that decision made before you go anywhere else. Because at that point, start working on a contract, re-sign him, and go from there. But then you can start getting DTR more work and seeing if he can be more than that. But, if Jameis Winston is not the answer, then you're starting to look at some of these other veteran quarterbacks. Is it Sam Darnold? Is it trading for somebody dumb enough to throw a awful check down at 4th down to lose the game against the Saints, like Kirk Cousins? There are other veteran options like that. Kirk Cousins does this a lot. I can't take it with that guy. But there are a lot of veterans you would want to figure out. But you need to find out the Jameis Winston. I still cannot believe he did that. Just throw it at his feet and kick the field goal.
Yeah.
Whatever. Kirk Cousins, no. I have no interest. Kirk Cousins, who has less playoff victories than Baker Mayfield, no.
Interesting. His
only playoff victory was with Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised you feel that way because he is a good quarterback. He's just, he just hasn't won very many big games or doesn't win very many big games.
Drives me insane.
He feels like a perfect fit for Kevin, no?
Well, he may well be. I have no interest in him. Kevin Stefanski obviously worked with him and had the most success he's ever had. He won an upset victory against those same Saints in the postseason.
Yeah.
That is Kirk Cousins' only playoff victory ever. My issue with Kirk Cousins always comes down to the same thing. When things are going well and he expects them to be, he is good. But even when the Browns have played him, when he was with the Vikings or some of these other places, when pressure gets to him, he crumples up and just cannot do it.
Okay, there we go. All right, this next portion is on Drew Aller.
Drew Aller. I'm honestly not quite sure if he's going to declare at this point, as I really do think he could use one more year in college. Coming out of high school, Aller was one of the fastest rising players in the class of 2022 and ended up spending his first year as a backup before taking over last year and this year. So far this season, Aller has over 2,000 yards with 13 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and has a top 15 QBR at 80.6. Sadly though, Aller has been plagued with inconsistency and not showing up in big games. Against Ohio State, the best team he's played this year, Aller went 12 of 20 for 146 yards without a touchdown and an interception. He also struggled against USC as he had 3 interceptions in that game, and really his only decent game this season came against Kent State as he had 4 total touchdowns in that game, but the Flashes are currently 0-9, so that really doesn't mean much. Except, everybody loves Aller because of his arm, because of his frame, and because of his potential. He somewhat feels like a Christian Hackenberg 2.0, and it seems like scouts are in love with him because of those reasons. It's not because of where Drew Aller is now, but where he could be, and if the right franchise gets a hold of him, he could become a superstar. Still though, I think he's kind of mentally off. I don't think he really has the it factor, so I would make a hard pass on Drew Aller, but scouts will be scouts, and there's many people who think he could be a day 1 quarterback, just based on his potential alone, but in my opinion, he's actually probably a worse prospect than Rourke, and Aller should go day 3 if he declares, but ultimately, I think he's going to come back for one more season at Penn State. And number
8. Drew Aller, local kid, no?
Yeah, he went to Medina.
Medina.
Here's the thing with Drew Aller versus Curtis Rourke. He's 20. Now, having said that, I don't think Drew Aller has played nearly enough football yet. I think he should stay in school. If he's going to stay at Penn State, I hope they give him a receiver worth a damn, because right now all he's got is tight ends. But there's a lot of ability there. You can see when you watch him the lack of experience, and he just needs to play a whole lot more football. And getting your experience in the NFL is not the way to go.
Agreed, very much. All right, Dylan Gabriel here.
We currently have Dylan Gabriel. He recently broke the all-time record for touchdown passes in a career, and it's easier to do that when you have an extra year compared to everybody else. As many of you guys know, I've been a skeptic of Dylan Gabriel for quite some time now, as I never really thought he was that good at Oklahoma. He put up big stats at UCF, and I will say, this year he has been good with Oregon, but again, he's had more time than pretty much anybody else in college football history to get better. When you've started for 6 years, you should be pretty dang good by the end of it. Currently, Gabriel has 2,800 passing yards with 22 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and has an 86.7 QBR. No one will doubt that Gabriel's put up big numbers during his career, but he is a little bit older, he's undersized at 6 foot, and many don't really think that he's a big-time NFL draft prospect. Many believe that he is barely a top 10 quarterback prospect overall, and to me, he screams a day 3 pick who will end up being a perennial backup in the NFL. Surely he's good enough to make it there, but I don't think he'll ever lead a franchise, and he definitely, in my eyes, is never going to be the guy for an NFL team. It could happen, but I really highly doubt it. Another guy who's in a...
All right, Dylan Gabriel, Oregon, 6 years? He's only 6 foot tall. Played at UCF, Oklahoma, and Oregon, you said, right? So what are your thoughts on Gabriel?
Yeah, so Dylan Gabriel is not 6 foot. I don't know how tall he will end up being, but I suspect it's going to be at most 5'11" and change. He's 24 years old. He's on his 3rd school. I don't think he has any tools that you sit there and dream about having. Additionally, it just seems like he is the quarterback you're always trying to upgrade, which is, he's made a heck of a college career, but I don't see anything that says to me I want him in the NFL. Sure. Especially, again, for the reasons I laid out earlier in terms of where the Browns are at quarterback. I would much rather have DTR than Gabriel. I would much rather have somebody else with more interesting tools than Gabriel.
Absolutely. All right, Garrett Nussmeier, is that right? I think I said that correctly.
Yep.
Very interesting situation right now is Garrett Nussmeier. A couple weeks ago, many thought that Garrett could be a first-round pick, but all of a sudden his stock is falling apart. After being a 4-star recruit in the class of 2021, Nussmeier has spent his time learning and waiting on the bench behind guys like Jaden Daniels. Nussmeier's finally taken off in 2024, throwing for 2,900 yards with 21 touchdowns and 11 interceptions, and he also has a top 15 QBR. People like his size, his decision-making, his arm, and his ability to pick up an NFL caliber system, but recently Nussmeier has begun to struggle. In a game against Texas A&M, he looked terrible, and then this past weekend, he was really bad against Alabama. He had 2 costly interceptions against the Crimson Tide, and many people now believe that Nussmeier will come back for another year in 2025 and try to work his draft stock back up during that season. Nussmeier is definitely an intriguing prospect, and ultimately, like Alar, I think he'll wait one more year. Now we get to our
All right, Nussmeier, I think you mentioned before, hasn't played enough games for your liking, probably.
Yes, so he is the Cardale Jones fallacy. He played like 3 games where he was real good, and people were like, hey, he might be a first-round pick, and I understand it. His dad is a longtime quarterbacks coach. He does a lot of things that look like he's been coached at this for years and years and years. Yeah. But much like Cardale Jones, when you got to games 4, 5, 6, and 7, all these other games, he doesn't look so good. And you see a guy who has not played much football. And because teams didn't have much tape on him, they didn't know what to do. They have adjusted. They have given him more things. And that's part of the reason I want guys who have had experience, guys who have had to teams have adjusted to what they do well. You just have to start figuring things out. I don't dislike Garrett Nussmeier, but I agree with the assessment. He should go back to school. And it's unfortunate. He was stuck behind Jaden Daniels, who's phenomenal. And Jaden Daniels played a ton of football in college. Garrett Nussmeier just has not played enough. For me, I don't hold the athletic deficiencies against him. He's not like he's not a super mobile guy. He's mobile enough. Great size, great arm. There's a lot to like there, but just has not played enough football. And again, the NFL is not where you go get experience.
Yep. All right. So he's going to start to get into some of the higher ranked guys in this class here, I think, as we transition to Carson Beck here.
Our top 6 quarterback prospects, who I believe will all go day 1 or day 2 at this point. The first guy we're going to talk about is Carson Beck. His stock has been free falling over the last few weeks, but he's still projected to go in the late first round or in the second round as of right now. Carson Beck originally came out of the city of Jacksonville, and after originally committing to Alabama, would eventually flip to Georgia, and just like a couple of other players on this list, he would have to wait his time before he ever got on the field. Beck was always seen as a future big-time option for him, as he has the correct size at 6'4", and seemingly had good awareness, and was athletic enough to make plays. Last year, he enjoyed his breakout season, in which he threw for 3,900 yards with 24 touchdowns, and then this year, he decided to come back and improve upon that. He was projected to be the number 1 overall pick going into the season and the top overall quarterback prospect, but so far, Beck has struggled. He's thrown for 2,400 yards with 17 touchdowns and an absurd high 12 interceptions. His QBR is barely inside the top 30, and his last couple of weeks have been awful. He has combined for 9 interceptions over the last 4 games, and he also had 3 interceptions against Alabama earlier on in the year. Against the 3 best teams that he has played, he has combined for 7 picks, and obviously Carson Beck is not being able to play well against the top competition, is making a lot of bad reads, and now they are losing games because of it. Beck is apparently blaming his running game for this, but ultimately I just don't think he was all that good, and this year he has been exposed because he was kind of bailed out last year by Brock Bowers and their strong running game with Milton and Edwards. Obviously Beck still has a couple of games to improve his stock. I'd say that his stock is falling, and he could easily end up outside of that top 6, and and become a day 2 or even day 3 pick if this trajectory continues. I'm not sure if he has another year of eligibility, but I think Georgia fans at this point will be ready to move on from him after the year, and we'll see if an NFL team gives him a chance. Our guy at number 5 is Jackson Dart.
All right. Do you agree with the assessment here on Carson Beck?
Carson Beck lost a top 15 pick tight end. He lost a second round receiver. He lost another guy who was drafted somewhere in there. They can't run block at all this year. There's a lot of things working against Carson Beck. He also hasn't played as much football as I would like. He's got like 23 starts at this point. And again, you are seeing that. So what we have found out about Carson Beck, he cannot carry Georgia by himself. I don't necessarily think that's a deal breaker, but the other issues I have in terms of lack of experience and those things do hurt him. I think some people will give him some grace and say he has played a murderer's row type schedule and he hung in there and did this, that, and the other thing. I'm not there with him. I think ultimately I'm not terribly interested. There's a world where I could see it, but not for me.
It's not even, it's like a day 2, day 3 type thing, right? He's not on the radar. Nobody's going to reach for him in the first 3 rounds of the draft, are they?
I don't know about after round 1. Things get weird. I don't think he would go round 1 or 2 at this point, but I'll be honest, none of these guys jump out at me as round 1 quarterbacks except one who they haven't gotten to yet.
Yep. All right. Very good. All right. Jackson Dart.
In my opinion, he's a lot like Bo Nix last year. I always thought Nix was one of the safer options in the 2024 draft, and you knew exactly what you're getting in him. Jackson Dart feels a lot like Bo Nix for this year, as he'll go under the radar but be one of the better quarterbacks from this class. Dart ended up coming out of Utah, and after originally going to USC for 1 season, he would eventually transfer over to Ole Miss, where he has now been starting for 3 straight years. Last year, he had over 3,300 yards with 23 touchdowns, and so far this year, Dart has 3,400 yards with 22 scores and only 4 interceptions, and also has the 4th best QBR in the country at 86.0. The knock on Dart's game, I guess, is the system he's in and his loss to Ole Miss, but in my opinion, he's been playing really, really well, and I think the system he's in is what's ultimately going to hurt him. In terms of his transition to the NFL, many believe he's just above average in a lot of those categories, but I think the same thing could have been said about Bo Nix. I think Jackson Dart is probably the safest option in the 2025 NFL draft, and if I was a franchise owner, I'd be taking him in the late 1st or the early 2nd round, because I think he has that it factor, and I think he will pick up an NFL style of system, plus he's just a lot of fun to watch. Jalen Milroe has been a polarizing...
All right, Jackson Dart, Ole Miss, just pulled off a big upset. He said he's been playing for 3 years. He's in the system. He didn't like the system he was in. He mentioned it and said he's the safest option. A lot of Bo Nix comps in there. What do you think of this?
I like him. He's got the things I want in terms of evaluating quarterbacks. He's 21. He has played a ton of football. He's obviously been successful. I'm not going to get into where he projected him in the draft. I don't know the answer to that. But if you're asking me, is this on the list of guys I want to watch and learn more about? Jackson Dart is absolutely on that list. He's not surrounded by superstar talent. They have some nice players there, but he is also, I don't know who gets the credit for this, but they've gone from a number of different receivers from being the star of a game. So there's a lot of things I like about Jackson Dart. I'll be very curious to see if he takes play. If he operates in like the Senior Bowl or one of those type of things, if he's eligible. But he's one I would like to learn more about. I think he's very intriguing, and I've seen his stock all over the place. Like, if you're talking to me and you're saying that Jackson Dart is available in the 4th round, I'm very interested in what he can do. Again, I don't want to, pigeonhole him in a certain spot in the draft or anything, because I don't know the answer. But he has all the things I would want to look at and learn more about in terms of the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, so much of these guys' actual draft position will be determined during the process postseason, right? So as they kind of get jostled around, people really dig into the film. they test, they do all that stuff, they meet, all of these things become factors. All right, so here is Jalen Milroe, Alabama.
Quarterback name over the last 2 years. Some thought he was extremely overrated last year, while others thought he could be a really good player in the modern NFL. Milroe ended up coming out of Texas, and after originally committing to the Texas Longhorns, he would flip to Alabama, and just like some other guys on the list, he would sit on the bench for a couple of years. Milroe ended up being behind Bryce Young and took over in 2023 for all but one game. He had a great finish to the 2023 season, finishing with 2,800 yards, 23 passing touchdowns, and 12 rushing scores. He would decide to stick it out with Kalen DeBoer, and so far this year, he has over 2,000 yards with 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a top 5 QBR at 85.7. He's also been doing a ton of damage on the ground, as he currently has 565 yards rushing with 16 touchdowns. What's more impressive about Milroe is that he has a lot of intangibles, including leadership and that it factor, and he has raised his play in a lot of their bigger games. Yes, he didn't play very well in their loss to Tennessee, but against Georgia, he had 4 touchdowns. Against Wisconsin, he had 5 touchdowns. Against Mizzou, he had a touchdown. And then most recently this week, he had 4 touchdowns in a road victory against number 15 LSU. Milroe is absolutely cruising, and he's seen as a guy who's extremely athletic, is a good leader, and has a good enough arm and passing skills to make it into the NFL. He's currently getting a lot of projections to go in the top 10, and I still don't know about that. He needs more consistency as a passer, but he has the playmaking ability, the intangibles, the athleticism, and the potential, and that's why I ultimately think Milroe would be a pretty good pick. And I don't know, at worst case scenario, you could probably play him at running back. Last year,
that last part's insane.
Yeah,
I understand why he said it. He genuinely has the vision and ability to do the things he's talking about as a running back, but let's not go there.
This is your guy, though, right?
Well, here's the thing. If you're asking me my unsolicited advice to Jalen Milroe, stay in school another year. He has not played a ton of football.
Okay.
Having said that, NFL teams are going to absolutely love him from everything I know about him, based on what you're hearing about the kid, what you're hearing about his work ethic, leadership, all those things. And then he has game-changing ability. The fact that he could do what he did against Georgia and LSU and all these other teams speaks volumes about him. He has a ton of upside as a passer, but right off the rip, I want to sit him for a year, which isn't great, but that's sort of, what I think you have to do with a kid like that. You have to take him along slowly, in terms of, and not to say that I think you basically set it at, don't start him his first year. And if he can overachieve and win you over, great. I think you treat him a lot like you did Lamar Jackson, in terms of just trying to do right by him as a player. And I don't think throwing him in there right off the rip is going to get him there. But that's why I understand why it's probably not going to happen. NFL money is what it is. But NIL has done some weird things, so who knows? But I would love it for him to stay another year in college, because I think he'd get significantly better, and really emphasize more efficiency as a passer. I don't think people realize how far he has come in a very short amount of time, from last year to now this year. But I would, perfect world, I would love to see him stay in college longer. Having said that, I think he's going into the top 10, because they're going to look at those things he can do, and somebody's going to talk themselves into it. And if he is everything he is advertised to be, in terms of the person, I can easily see how he would work out and be great. On top of everything else, he's Nigerian. My desperate need to find my Nigerian quarterback prospect to fill out the team of superstars I've already assembled that are Nigerian. That adds something else for me for Jalen Milroe. I love him, but again, I hope he plays more college.
Interesting. Face Disabler mentioning the Tommy Reese connection here, potentially, with which is good. You mentioned his intangibles multiple times when we've talked about him in the past, and his leadership off the field, and kind of what he said on the Scott Fisher says here is the it factor in big games and things like that, which certainly shows up. I guess my question is he the kind of guy, at the NFL level, Pete, that you have to like do what you did with Lamar and change everything around him? Or do you think
not necessarily, but it's just what he is forces defenses to completely change how they think, because he's got that ability to just take off and run with at 225 pounds with probably 4.4 speed, somewhere in that neighborhood, where he is like a running back in that sense of you have to treat him like that kind of guy. But having said that, we've seen any number of ways to do this. Lamar Jackson certainly has been a huge success for the Ravens, and they deserve credit for changing the offense to fit around him. But to the point that was already made, he just had Tommy Rees as his offensive coordinator and was successful with him. I do think the Kalen DeBoer experience is going to be good for him. But I think if Tommy Rees is here, he would understand sort of what he does well and be able to cater the offense without sort of feeling like you are changing everything to just fit him. I think he can do more things, but like you've seen it with Lamar Jackson, you've seen with Jalen Hurts, you're seeing the version that's not working very well right now with Anthony Richardson. You're going to see something to the effect of this with what the Falcons are going to have to do with Michael Penix. And they may be content to leave their offense as is. I assume they're going to sort of lean to a different part of the playbook, which is what the Browns would do. They're not going to, by virtue of empowering him to sort of decide what he likes best, his offense is going to look different than Jameis Winston's offense would look versus what Deshaun Watson's offense is going to look. He's going to find a comfort zone. Maybe it's more like what we've seen from DTR to this point, which does include a lot of using the legs and some of those other things. But I don't think you feel the need to sort of, I don't think you need to like go to the extent of running, some of the stuff they did with Lamar Jackson. But I do think it's going to be a process, and you are teaching him a lot and trying to get him as much experience as possible without putting him on the field if you draft him after this year.
Yeah. Certainly interesting prospect and somebody to keep your eye on for sure. All right, so we've got a couple more left here. Shedeur Sanders next.
I remember Shedeur Sanders saying something about how he wouldn't go to the NFL draft unless he was promised to go in the top 2. I remember almost spitting my drink out when I heard that, but Sanders so far in 2025 has proven he is a really good quarterback. The site I'm looking at has him ranked as the number 3 overall quarterback prospect, and I would probably have him at number 3 as well. Obviously, he is the son of Coach Prime, and after originally spending time at Jackson State, he came to Colorado last year and put up big numbers, but it was on a bad team, and many thought that his personality and off-the-field drama would get in the way. This year, Shedeur has come to work, as through 8 games, he's thrown for 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, and only 6 picks, while also having a 73% completion percentage, has 8.6 yards per attempt, and has a passer rating of 165.0. Shedeur also has that flashy it factor, a good arm, is really athletic, and has seemingly started to find his stride, and most importantly, his confidence. I think there's a really good chance that he goes in the top 5 of the 2025 draft, and at this point, I don't really think it'd be a bad pick. I would have been skeptical of that in the preseason, but Shedeur has shown it on the field, and he does look like a quarterback that could make it in the NFL. Only time will tell if he can put it all together, but for now, Shedeur has turned into a pretty good quarterback prospect and could arguably be the number 2 guy. Except for now, many still believe that.
All right, so Shedeur Sanders, what do you think of him as a player? You think he is he's saying top 5 in the draft?
Yeah, I don't see that. Right now, to me, he strikes me more of late first round. Somebody trades up into the first round to get him to get the 5th-year option. Maybe he goes in the middle of the first round. But based on my criteria, you have to include him in the list. He's played a ton of football. He is young, has had success, been efficient. His turnover-worthy play rate this year is insanely low. There are things I don't like about what he does on the field in terms of he's not very good in the pocket in terms of stepping up. He wants to bring everything back, and he takes a lot of bad sacks. And I'm not even going to get the other stuff that you would have to vet as well. I'm just saying that I would want to learn more about. He's on the list of guys I would want to learn more about. You have to. And if you're putting yourself in a situation where you can get him you can take a player, in the first, wherever the Browns end up, first 14, 15 picks or whatever, if that's where they end up, and then you can come back and get a Shedeur Sanders at the top of the second round or late first round, you can convince yourself of that, because if all else fails, you could then move on and go get somebody else. You are not that invested in him. But again, I have concerns about he doesn't have elite physical traits. And obviously you'd have to vet the other stuff, but just in terms of criteria that I would want to know more about the quarterback, he fits.
The arm talent.
Does not have a great arm. He's fine.
Accurate.
But he's very accurate. There's no denying like his playmaking ability as a passer. He is legit made some incredible throws. Now you could push back and say, who has he really played?
Yeah.
All the teams they played that were like good, they played last year. The Big 12 is the Big 12. I mean, there's a reason they left and went to the Big 12. This was easier for them. We'll see what happens if they can somehow, to their credit, they have overachieved relative to where I thought they would be this year.
Sure.
If they can find their way into the playoff or something along those lines, that could be helpful for him. If he takes part in the All-Star process after the season, that could be great for him. One of the concerns I have is he's never been coached by anyone but his father in football. I can't speak to any other sports. That is worrying. And that would be why the All-Star process would matter. He, the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Game or whatever, he has to get coached by somebody else. How does he respond to that? Like, is that going to be a thing where you've literally only ever been coached by one guy? And yes, he's obviously had position coaches and different offensive coordinators, and he worked with different private quarterback coaches and stuff like that, but it's different. So those are all things you'd have to figure out, but you have to do the research on him. You have to learn more about it because he's done enough to warrant that.
I can't do it, Pete. The circus that would follow Sanders into town would be ridiculous, and I don't know if this organization can deal with another circus like that.
All fair.
Quinn Ewers is the number 2 overall prospect. Quinn Ewers was one of the best prospects we have seen in years coming out of high school, and originally he decided to go to Texas, but would end up reclassifying and going to Ohio State. He spent 1 year in Columbus before transferring back to Texas in 2022, and in 2022 and 2023, Ewers had nearly 6,000 yards and close to 40 touchdowns. He led Texas to the college football playoff last year and probably could have been taken in the first or second round, but decided to come back. Through the first couple of games, Ewers looked like the number 1 quarterback prospect in the country, but he ended up getting hurt. In total, Ewers has thrown for 1,700 yards with 19 touchdowns and 6 picks, but his QBR is 36th in the country at 71.4. Texas also hasn't played a ton of big games, and in their biggest game to date against number 5 Georgia, he ended up struggling a little bit, throwing for 211 yards with 2 touchdowns and an interception. He didn't exactly raise his play that much. Many love Quinn Ewers' arm, they love his height, they love his intangibles, they love his confidence, and overall they think he's a good quarterback whose mechanics need to be refined, and he also has had a couple of injury issues. Overall though, he's a quarterback with a good strong arm, is mobile enough, and should do well in the NFL. Honestly, right now I'd probably take Shedeur over him, but Ewers might have a better long-term fit in the league. I'm not quite sure though. Okay, so the last guy.
All right, Quinn Ewers, thoughts?
Yeah, he's right on the border of the guys I'd be interested in terms of experience. The thing, and he has a ton of talent, and there's a number of things you can say that are positive about him. The issue is that you can say, but he was hurt a whole lot with Quinn Ewers. He's gotten hurt a lot in college. That's, another thing going in Shedeur's favor is he is tough. Now, I worry that he's taken so many hits that he could be suddenly get to the NFL and you're suddenly can't get there and now he breaks. But Shedeur Sanders is incredibly tough in terms of his ability to take hits and get up. Quinn Ewers, unfortunately, it's not his fault, but has been a guy who gets nicked up quite a bit. Again, he's sort of on the border of where I'd want to be to learn more about it. But ultimately, if he stays healthy and plays well down the stretch, then yeah, he's going to end up on the list. But right now, he's sort of right on the edge.
Okay. And then finally, probably Cam Ward is probably right now, like nationally, has the most buzz around him. Would you agree with that, Pete?
No, it just depends who you know.
Depends who you talk to.
Let's put it this way: he's the most highly discussed. So in terms of buzz from that standpoint, you're absolutely right. He's a huge topic of conversation because people have him all over the place in terms of where he's ranked.
Gotcha.
He's definitely on the list. He has played a ton of football from Incarnate Word to Washington State to now Miami. He's gotten better in every level he's played at. He's had a ton of success. There's no questioning the amount of ability he has. Yes, there are concerns with some of the turnover-worthy plays he makes and some of the risks he takes. But from size to arm to everything he can do as a playmaker, yes, you have to. And he's 22. So, yes, you absolutely have to investigate Cam Ward and see what he can do. Now, one of the questions you have, and I don't know if it's going to be held against him, he's played at 3 different schools. Now, it's a little bit different for him in that when he left Incarnate Word, he's moving up from FCS to FBS, and he went with his coach. And then after, I don't know if he graduated from Washington State or not, and just graduate transfer, but ultimately he transferred up again as Washington State is now in a shell of what used to be the Pac-12, and Miami's playing a better level of football in the ACC. He has played better this year. He's been better at protecting the football, even though you can still see the same footprints of the mistakes he's made in the past. Another guy, you want to see him in the all-star circuit and see how he responds to those things. But yes, you absolutely have to investigate Cam Ward.
So just to regroup, and in the video, he mentions, he keeps saying erratic behavior, but I think he's talking about on the field decision making. All right, so I don't think there's no off the field red flags with him, is there?
Not that I know of.
Okay. So your guys that you would be interested in, just to recap, because you got to do work on these guys, right? You got to dig in the off season and they go through the process and everything. But potential interest for the Browns: Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Shador Sanders, got to kick the tires on, and Cam Ward are the big 4, right?
Yep.
Interesting stuff. And we will continue to keep an eye on that, as that is certainly pertinent to where the Browns end up draft-wise. And as these guys develop, as I talked about before, they go through the senior week or their East-West Shrine game, they get evaluated again. They play, so for some guys, at smaller schools, they play at a completely different level against completely different level kids. They get compared there. And through this process, guys go up and down teams' boards based on interviews and things like that and the intangibles. So, so much of, I think in the past years, it's almost too much, Pete. Like, I feel like sometimes teams put too much into the process and not enough into the film.
I agree with you. What I always find fascinating, and there are certainly exceptions, is so often where the draft rankings sort of start at when guys are done competing. Yeah, and I include the All-Star weeks with that. The further we get away from the game stuff and you get into the combine stuff, which is incredibly valuable, the athletic data, I want all of it. You sort of start getting into wonkier rankings. And then by the time the draft rolls around, you pretty much end up back where the film took you, with some exceptions. Trayvon Walker is certainly I would classify as an exception in that conversation. Not that he wasn't going to be a highly drafted player, but it wasn't until he did what he did at the combine that he became the number 1 overall player. But for the most part, a lot of these guys, where you sort of figured them out on the film, unless you just hadn't gotten to them for one reason or another, is largely going to be where you end up with them. And then the rest of it is, figuring out who they are, the personality fit, are they a hard worker? How much do they really care about this? Are they a knucklehead off the field? All that stuff, which is super important and not an easy thing to nail down. But yeah, I typically end up back where I started, or just add guys to as I go. I mean, the Browns the Browns signed a guy today that I liked as a flyer for the Browns in that 7th round undrafted area in Chigozie Nuziem, which should surprise nobody, is Nigerian. But 6'1", 200 pounds, 4.4 speed, 79-inch wingspan, and put guys on the ground. I'm sold at that point already. I'm happy they put him on the active roster. I don't know if he's going to be anything, but if he could be a gunner at that size, you're thrilled. But at that position, those are the type of guys you want. That is a huge body that can move very fast and might be able to develop into something. And if he doesn't, so be it. But that's the type of evaluation and stuff. Those are the guys I want to take as flyers. And that's going to be sort of what the draft process becomes after we get past that initial wave of guys to the flyer type guys. Miles Harden certainly qualified in that area as that type of guy. And we'll see what he ends up with. But, super productive, ideally. Great athlete in the right age range. Nuziem, I think, is a little bit older. I think he was close to 24, but that's why you sort of looked at him at the end of the draft. And knock it out that way.
In the chat, they're asking about the running back from Boise State, Pete.
He's phenomenal. There are a lot of phenomenal guys at positions that you generally don't want to draft earlier. I haven't watched enough to Ashton Jeanty to get to that point where I'm trying to talk myself into it. And I doubt I will ever talk myself into it. If you're trying to get me to fall in love with, if the draft was today and the Browns had to make a pick at 4, there are 2 guys I based on them picking 4th, there are 2 guys that I love for the Browns right now. One of them is Tedoroya McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. And the other has the initials MG, who plays at Michigan. Mason Graham is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes against a lot of what I've talked about in terms of premium position, although I think a 3-tech would qualify. He would be a 3-tech who could play nose.
Yeah.
But he's not sort of that premier group where wide receiver would be quarterback, defensive end, corner, those type of positions, where Tedoroya McMillan certainly would be 6'5", super fluid, insane production. My biggest knock on him is my understanding he's a Chad Thomas fan. So that hurts him quite a bit for me. But other than that, you can easily sit here and go, man, the Browns get a bridge quarterback and have him, Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, potentially Elijah Moore back, Jamari Thrash, David Njoku, all those guys. And you're like, okay, I can roll with this for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Very good stuff there, Pete. You're watching the React on the OBR streaming network. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Yeah. How did you know that he's a Chad fan? That's interesting.
Somebody I know told me that who's done far more research into these things and stalks things like Instagram, let me know that, which I immediately dinged him on.
Yeah, gotta ding him for that. All right, for
a lot of people like Major 9. It's really irritating.
That is irritating. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Get it locked over at theobr.com, where we are putting out content 24/7 to cover your Browns as we head into game week post by 8 games left. Make sure you subscribe so you can get all of that behind the paywall VIP content as well. That we are making available to you. So appreciate you all here watching in the chat. We've got one more video. It's the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, and they are talking total rebuild or roster tweaks. That's the way they phrased it. So here we go. Should be fun.
So didn't definitely say he won't be back. When you look at this team in whole, do they need a complete tear down and rebuild to get back into contention, or do you believe a few tweaks here and there, they could be back in playoff contention next season?
First of all, I've never been a fan of a total rebuild. I think that they just need a couple of positions here and there. Mainly, I think that they need to address. I think they need an explosive wide receiver. Quarterback position.
A true number one, right?
Yeah, they need a true number one. One that guys will be like, we got a game plan for them. If they get that, That unlocks Judy. That unlocks Cedric Tillman. They got to have somebody that Amari Cooper when he was like 24, like that would be perfect because teams will be like, oh, this guy can do everything.
Not a lot of options there.
No.
I mean, T. Higgins is a free agent. You consider him a legit number one?
No, I don't.
DK Metcalf, then. Maybe they make a trade for him. There's nobody else. T. Higgins is the best wide receiver on free agency. So if you don't consider him a true number one, then they're going to have to trade.
Or they're going to have to hit in the draft.
Okay.
Which this would be the first time they would draft a wide receiver in the first round since Corey Coleman.
Yeah, how'd that turn out?
Jesus. Well, that wasn't. AB didn't make that.
Well, true. AB's done a great job drafting wide receivers.
Talk to him.
Man, we had the worst GM. Ray Farmer wanted receivers who were 5'9".
Can I finish?
Go ahead.
Can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. The floor. Mike gave me the floor.
Go ahead. You got the floor back.
As far as if they find the wide receiver, I think that unlocks a lot of things. And as hard as it might say, you got to assess the running back position as well. I'm sorry. Like I know Nick Chubb is beloved. You can bring Nick Chubb back, but I think you still need a dynamic running back because I don't think Jerome Ford is that guy. He hasn't shown to be that guy, even with the opportunities that he's had. So I think you need that guy still at running back. That you can still interchange Nick Chubb in there because I do think Nick Chubb still earns the respect. He still is going to have moments where he looks like he can be all the way back, but you need an every down back that also can be very good in that run game. And outside of that, I think you got to tweak your coaching staff. I think you got to look and figure out why did we go from being a really good run team for the past 3 years and now all of a sudden we can't formulate a way to run the ball. So I think you got to find you a good run game coordinator to bring in.
We had Stump Mitchell.
I'm just throwing my opinion.
Run it all last
Stump
year.
wasn't the run game coordinator.
No, I know, but I'm saying we had a good running back coach. Bill Callahan was here. Those guys aren't here anymore.
Yeah. So I think you got to assess that.
Did you ignore quarterback because it's obvious that they need it? Or
I'm not.
You're saying besides quarterback?
I figured that was a given.
Look,
G, go ahead.
This is devastating. You're right, Bull. Shout out for you for looking at this. It's looking real bleak. You say you need
the free agent receivers?
No, free agent everything. Here's your options for quarterback: Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco is in Indianapolis. They will not let him go. Jacoby Brissett, we already had. Matt.
Do I even need to bring this one up? How's that working out? I believe I had that.
Yeah, you did have that total failure going on in Flacco.
I have nothing negative to say about Joe Flacco, but the hand-wringing over not re-signing him was ridiculous. The idea that people were saying the season was lost because the Browns did not sign a soon-to-be 40-year-old quarterback was outrageous. And yes, the Browns did not sign him because of Deshaun Watson. No, Deshaun Watson did not ask the franchise not to re-sign Joe Flacco. He didn't need to.
It's just the smart thing to do.
They got a guy. Look, Joe Flacco won the Super Bowl in 2012.
Yep.
Jameis Winston won the Heisman in 2013.
Yep.
What was it, redshirt freshman? That was a long time ago. And Jameis Winston is a decade younger. He can do everything that Joe Flacco is currently doing for the Colts right now. And hopefully he doesn't. But that was just a preposterous, it's the same thing when people wanted to fire Andrew Berry over trading Josh Dobbs for a 5th-round pick. The Browns are ultimately going to get a compensatory pick for Joe Flacco. And hopefully Joe Flacco plays more for the Colts, so it ensures that it's a 6th-round pick. But this was one of the dumbest arguments ever in terms of, Joe Flacco was a lot of fun. I enjoyed 2023. It was a magical ride. But to suggest that this was a sustainable model, that you are going to regain this magic again, I got 2 names for you. Randall Cunningham, who was signed by the Vikings while he was laying linoleum in Las Vegas, has that magical season where he's phenomenal. And I watched that Vikings team, and it was so much fun, and they lose in the conference championship after their kicker misses the field goal. Great. Steve DeBerg is the other one who had a late 30-something-year-old late year where he was good. And then Randall Cunningham was laying linoleum again, basically right after that. Steve DeBerg went right back to being, not good, basically too old. And then Joe Flacco looks 40 because he's going to. And I cited some of the reasons I thought this was going to happen, that he was going to now be throwing all the time as opposed to being very fresh off the couch and all these other things. And I don't know that he has the same zip he did last year. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But his body is 40, and you take some of the hits he was taking and would have taken probably more here, given the state of the offensive line. It was going to end badly, and I'm glad that he was not here to sort of have his I like that his Cleveland legacy remains intact. I also think you have to give some credit to Kevin Stefanski and the ability to get good play out of these guys that the Colts have not gotten from him. And I'm not suggesting that's entirely coaching fault. Again, I think a lot of that is age, but like Joe Flacco was not good with the Broncos, not great with the Jets, not good with the Colts. And then in between, you had this sort of oasis of the Browns for that run. A lot of fun. I understand why people enjoy Joe Flacco. Class act all the way. Was not realistic. And it's proving that. Now that he's back on the bench, unfortunately, for the Colts.
Yes, he has been put back on the bench. And yeah, in retrospect, you're absolutely right. I think the best thing about that is that you have, nothing got ruined about the run last year and the magical run that he provided in Cleveland. So very cool. And yeah, he played terrible last week. It was awful. And then you also have, so this discussion here of the rebuild, I agree with Tyvis to a certain extent. I don't know. What do you about the running back? I don't really see that as like a huge need at the moment. I think there's other things that you would address first. Probably the offensive line.
Yeah. So like the Browns, once Nick Chubb went down last year, the Browns couldn't run the ball at all. Their offensive line was not good last year. That is the key to why they could not run the ball then. It's the key why, and now with a very mortal Nick Chubb, it's the key why they can't run the ball now. It has very little to do with coordinating. They've been hurt consistently this year. It has killed them. When the Browns had a great offensive line, they ran the ball really well, and obviously Nick Chubb makes guys better. So to me, the offensive line is clearly the bigger deal, and particularly guard is a big deal. And I'm not writing off Wyatt Teller or Joe Bitonio. I just think that's the position they need to emphasize, and I think they need a starting center, and they need to develop. They need to draft or sign or whatever more depth at tackle to develop. Running back to me is a great opportunity this year because this class is very good at running back. There are a lot of guys throughout this class that I think are really interesting. That being said, I think there's a compelling argument in the NFL we are seeing this year that a superstar running back value has actually increased as opposed to being more marginalized in past years. I think those guys are actually making a big difference. Jonathan Taylor right now for the Colts, who ran really well in the game last week, is a good example, but like superstar running backs are making a difference in a world of too high and all these other things. Wide receiver, I agree. They need a number one. I think you just keep going and going and going. Now, I would love another tight end and quarterback. So if you are just looking at it from that standpoint, and you obviously they clarified this, thankfully, and said total rebuild, tear it down, rebuild it. That is not what they should do. But if you want to, if you're looking at all the positions I just named and want to say that's a rebuild on offense, I don't have a problem calling it that. That's fine. But there's no tear down involved in that unless you're tearing down some some of these older contracts that are going to make space. Like, Ethan Post's contract would free up about $6 million. Not having Jedrick Wills free up a decent amount of money. Not having Zadarius Smith's contract will free up a decent amount of money. If Joe Bitonio were to retire, that frees up a certain amount of money. If they want to move on from Wyatt Teller or Jack Conklin, that would obviously free up money. I still think the Browns are going to end up keeping Wyatt Teller and Conklin, but we shall see where that goes. But that's a lot of work to do on offense. The good news is they don't need much of anything really on defense. There are things I would like them to do. I would like them to get two more defensive tackles, one that's a two-gapper and one that's a three-tech.
Yeah.
And if you get a little bit of crossover, like a guy like Mason Graham from Michigan, that would be great. I also would like to see them get another defensive end somewhere. They've got 4 that I think will be fine. But if you get a great opportunity, let's say you're sitting at the top of the second round and one of these premier super bendy edge guys is there who's got a ton of production, I'd be all about it. There's a couple guys that I think are interesting that I'm keeping my eye on, including a dude from Louisville who does a lot of things I think the Browns are going to be interested in terms of what Jim Schwartz likes to do and having a big body with length and those other things. So I would love to keep building on that strength, and hopefully Isaiah McGuire can be the guy that ends up being sort of the true starter that's across from Myles Garrett. But until they have that guy, you got to keep looking. Linebacker, I have no interest in drafting linebackers ever, and I believe my theory has been proven out. Don't do it. Just go find Mahmoud Diabate and let him thrive. Doing great. Devin Bush, perfectly fine, reasonable backup. I don't think he's great, but he's been fine. Winston Reed can do Winston Reed things. They've got a lot of guys there. Buki Watson, I guess he's on the team. I didn't love that pick at the time. I thought if you were going to draft him, he had to be sort of able to do something. Right now, he's not. So that sort of leaves me iffy. But linebacker's not a position I want to prioritize in the draft. Corner, the Browns are going to do what they do. They're always going to take corners. Good habit. I would like them to start looking for a free safety. I am not nearly as down on Juan Thornhill as a lot of people are. I think he's far better than more people give credit for, but he's going to have one more year on his contract left. So he's on entering the last year of his contract. They could certainly extend him. He's the free safety that the Browns want for this scheme, center fielder type, and he's good when he's on the field. But the calf issues have been issues, and his dealing with those has been frustrating. So I do think it would behoove the Browns to get somebody else that can ultimately be a true free safety behind him. With Grant Delpit and Ronnie Hickman, you're great at the other spots. And that 3 safety lineup they want. That's another reason I think they need to get a safety to develop, is because they do like to put 3 safeties on the field. And you can't have one injury sort of completely throw that out the window. So defensively, I look at it as more of an opportunity side of the ball as opposed to needs. I laid out that there are about 10 guys that are currently 26 and under that are going to be part of the defense next year and contributing. I think 7 of them are on rookie deals. They have a lot of expenses on the defensive side of the ball right now. And they have a lot of flexibility with that. And because they've been able to do these things, assuming Isaiah McGuire can keep going, assuming Mike Hall stays on the field and keeps playing well, Alex Wright's going to come back, and hopefully he takes another step forward. You've got guys that can sort of step up and take on roles. Mahmoud Diabate is a huge lift. Cameron Mitchell being able to sort of contribute has been great for them. Grant Delpit is in that group. JOK is in that group. They're both on contract extensions, but you're thrilled to have them on contract extensions. So the Browns defense can sustain quite a while. I fully expect them to extend Myles Garrett in the offseason. All of a sudden, holy crap, your defense is pretty good. And I'm not throwing away Denzel Ward like a lot of people are. He's still a very good corner. And until he decides he's not playing, he's playing. He's still playing well. So you've got a lot of dudes. And Martin Emerson certainly in that group. So that allows you to then go and, if an opportunity is there to take a guy you really like on the defensive line or something, great. But it allows you to put your efforts and your energy into offense and really focus on that. Now that side of the ball can start getting younger, more effective. Certainly having guys like DeJuan Jones, if he can sustain, having Cedric Tillman, those type of players can sort of make that a lighter lift. But they need a lot of work.
Yep. Well said.
Jones, Andy Dalton, Mason Rudolph, and Carson Wentz.
Let me ask you about Sam Darnold while we're here for a second. You mentioned Sam Darnold.
That would be the name.
If Sam Darnold has a great season, like they just drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round.
Yeah, they love him. They love him.
They love him.
They love McCarthy.
Are they going to move on from Sam Darnold?
Yeah, they probably will. I mean, they're not going to pay Darnold because Darnold could get paid starter money.
Right, he's going to get. Now he's got to finish the season off because he's had a great first half. But if he tails off, in the second half,
here's the thing.
He gonna lose money. That's
so
all that means.
Isn't he struggling a little right now?
He has fallen off a little bit, but the framing of that question is incorrect. Are the Vikings going to move on from Sam Darnold? No. Sam Darnold is going to move on from the Vikings because he's going to say, hey, I played well. They've got J.J. McCarthy coming back. I'm going to see if I can't get a job elsewhere. Now, maybe there's a world where he says, I love this situation. I'm perfectly content to be a backup behind J.J. McCarthy because I love everything about this. But that doesn't sound very realistic. I think he wants to go and start somewhere else. It would not shock me if in that conversation, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah goes, hey, man, you should really check out Cleveland. This is a good fit. We feel like this could be really good for you, and put in a good word for him because this is a thing that happens. And maybe that's something that gets you Sam Darnold. And I'm not saying you want Sam Darnold necessarily or not. I just think that would be something that could happen.
It's an option.
Standpoint. But either way, I think Sam Darnold is going to go on the open market and see what's out there because, of course, he is. He's not stupid. There's more money out there. He could get a decent salary and be the bridge quarterback, be it here or somewhere else. Or, maybe he can, pick it up again and play better and, sort of position himself to be in the Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith tier of quarterbacks, which, if you're the Browns, that would not be a bad option for you. What does that cost and all those things? Those are real questions you have to answer. But that's where I sit here and look at this and go, the Browns don't have to force a quarterback pick. If they take care of this part first, then they can play it as they see it. If they love a quarterback, they can go try to get that quarterback. If they just sitting there going, we're good with what we have, or the guy we wanted was off the board before we could get him, or the trade didn't work out, whatever, then you don't sit there and force yourself into a bad situation and you just play it like it is. You still got DTR. That's a good place to be at. Operate from a position of strength, basically find your Alex Smith to then try to replace with either Colin Kaepernick or Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
The one thing I would say is that JJ's on a rookie deal.
Yeah.
And if you let's say the Vikings win the NFC North.
Yeah.
And they go to the playoffs.
I'm not letting them walk.
You can't.
No, you better not.
You can't.
And there's a good chance they're going to do that. Even maybe not win the North because the Lions are there. But
could they franchise?
They could.
I can see them doing that.
That's a crazy salary now, though.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah, but as Dustin said, they're not paying the other quarterback any money.
Who cares? I mean, so what's the number? Like
and
35 million?
coming off an injury where he misses the whole. I don't know. What's he going to be like next year?
Yeah, he's not. Take him off the board.
Yeah.
If Darnold has that good year, and we want him, the Vikings aren't letting him.
No,
go. Not for next year.
Yeah.
He
fit
the offense.
The franchise tag, Dustin, by the way.
It's a 35. That's my guess.
Well, for a quarterback this season, it was 38. It'll be a little high, about 40 million.
Yeah, but for 1 year,
who cares?
Who cares?
Doesn't matter.
I mean,
the receiver
you gotta.
Unlikely they will pay $40 million for their backup quarterback.
It would take a lot of balls. I would applaud the move. I would get it. I don't know if they want to spend $40 million on that. But if you're saying, listen, man, we want to set this up really well, great. Here's the thing. I don't think there's a world where Sam Darnold right now is worth $40 million to anyone. Even though, even if the Vikings are in a sort of play it like the Browns in terms of money doesn't really matter. If they can get to that point, maybe they can. And it's just sort of like, this is the price of doing business for this. I think it'd be a cagey, interesting move. The way Dustin Fox lays it out, it's interesting. Genuinely interesting. Are they willing to franchise him to do that? I don't know. I don't know what else they have in terms of free agents and stuff like that. Be very interesting for them to go that route. I doubt, I would like to say Sam Darnold probably wouldn't be happy about that, but it probably would be pretty happy about that to go get $40 million for the 1 year.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting strategy. I wouldn't rule it out. I would be very interested to see if it actually happens. Because at some point, if the player doesn't want to do it, you get into a weird situation. All I'll say is it's interesting. We'll see what happens. I have a tough time believing it will happen because he's not great. We'll see.
Yeah.
Owner that says pay it.
Receiver market is worse than the quarterback market.
I mean, T.
Higgins is number one.
Yeah.
Number two is Amari Cooper. You already gave him up.
All right. Let me just say this before the Browns don't pay wide receivers in free agency for a reason, because you have to overpay always, or at least they haven't under Barry that I can recall.
They're not going to.
No.
You're talking about positions that you don't do this. Jack Duffin talks about this all the time. This is why they are premier positions. These are players you have to trade for or draft.
Yes.
Or resign. Like, you don't get these type of players in free agency, and you shouldn't be trying to do that. That's really bad business. You should be using free agency to address things like center and guard potentially. And I don't love that idea for guard. I'd rather draft it, but there's a world where I could absolutely see you signing, if Joel Bitonio were to retire, sign a stopgap guard and draft a guard. But ultimately, like, free agency is where you want to get depth. Maybe some starters at certain interesting positions. Like, there are positions where it makes sense, but you're not chasing after T. Higgins, and you're not going to go after Amari Cooper again. If you're trying to get a number one receiver, you are going to try to draft it. You are going to try to trade for it. And it's impossible for me to guess, but like, the Browns, why would the Browns go away from the thing that got them Amari Cooper with a 5th round pick and a swap of 6th round picks, or trading a 5th and 6th round pick for Jerry Jeudy? They had to give up practically nothing. Why would they overextend themselves in the free agent market to do the same thing? They wouldn't. They would follow the same track they've been doing it and have been really successful with to this point, and keep drafting, because that's how you have to do it. And people can criticize their wide receiver drafting. They've taken one player dating back to Sashi Brown in the 1st round of wide receiver. And the people they're mad about, like Anthony Schwartz, fine, all these other things. Cedric Tillman's pretty good, and he's a 3rd round pick. Like, let's see what Damari Thrash can do. This is how it works at that position. It is volatile. The miss rate is extremely high. You just keep swinging and hope you get lucky, because people think like the Steelers crush wide receivers. Their miss rate is way higher than you think it is. The best team in drafting wide receivers is the Minnesota Vikings. It's really irritating how good they are at it, but they have nailed it in terms of Justin Jefferson. If he can stop drinking and driving, the kid from USC is really good. They just find dudes that work. Jordan Addison, he's really good.
Tremendous.
They have been really good at evaluating and finding wide receiver talent. But like everybody else, it is constantly swinging and hoping for the best.
Yep.
Chris Godwin.
How old is he?
Stephon Diggs.
Getting old.
DeAndre Hopkins. Old. Deontay Johnson was never that good.
I mean, any of those top 5 guys are better than
what we got.
the Browns' best receiver. But
Hollywood Brown, Keenan Allen is old. Elijah Moore is 9, and Mike Williams is 10.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody in that list.
T. Higgins is the best because he's the youngest, and we don't know, can he be a legit number 1 or not, but he's been injury prone. The best option is the trade, or the draft, or getting DK Metcalf in a trade. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Seattle may not want to pay him big money. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where that's coming from. I don't.
One idea. I just don't know that the Seahawks are going for it, since they. The guy I thought they would trade would be the other dude who was getting older, and they kept extending him and working it out. So I don't think they're in any hurry to get rid of DK Metcalf.
But he's a legit number 1.
And there is no, so that's the hard part about the Browns. There is no just easy, let me go down the yellow brick road and find a quarterback. Let me go get this receiver because he's free agent. Like, no. And plus, you might not even have a top 5 pick. So, no, they're not 1 pick away. They got multiple holes that they need to figure out. They got multiple guys that you're like, listen, they still need another defensive end.
Yeah. But here's the question. Here's what really Mike is trying to get at. Do the Browns need to can they just not start over, but like if you say a complete rebuild, that means you're trading Myles Garrett, you're trading David Njoku, you're moving on from Nick Chubb. Like, are you doing those things, or are you just trying to get better, keep the key core guys you have, hope you can hit on a quarterback, whether it's free agency, trade, or the draft?
The biggest problem with all of this is it's the development aspect of it all, because I just feel like if you develop properly, you wouldn't be in this conversation. Like, you wouldn't need you've already utilized picks to get certain things, but you haven't developed them to be act good on Sundays, and that to me is the problem. I just like
the reason why
they have enough talent.
I just went through 10 guys on defense that are 26 and under, 2 of which have been extended contracts. They have a lot of really good players. Cedric Tillman balling out right now. DeJuan Jones, left tackle. These are the 2023 draft class is crushing it for the Browns, other than Siaki Ika, which I first guessed is terrible. Everything else is working really well for that draft, and they've got production from this draft already. So I don't understand this development criticism at this point. The Browns have way more young talent than people are giving them credit for. They'll be fine on that standpoint. And a lot of this is sort of getting to a point where you figure out the draft element, which I think they've sort of figured out in 2023. I'm hoping we return to that in 2025 or this 2025 draft. That part to me is absolutely nuts. The other thing that's insane is like we watched the Vikings, who many people predicted to finish last in the AFC North, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, many of which were projected to finish last in the AFC North, myself included, who got not even a good quarterback. They got decent enough, and now Russell Wilson is pretty good.
Yep.
The Vikings got Sam Darnold. These are the guys you're talking about, and they just plugged away and built because that's what the NFL is. The tear down model was because the Browns had nothing. They weren't tearing anything down. They were knocking over like scaffolding.
Yeah.
They actually have real things in place. And on defense in particular, they are really good and really young on defense. Is it growing great this year? No, they're still a really good defense, just not historic. Offensively, they've got guys, and we're starting to see that. I wrote about this week, or what was that, yesterday? I've lost track of the days.
Yeah.
Elijah Moore is 24 years old. He is younger than Mike Woods, who I answered a question on why are they not playing Mike Woods? Elijah Moore is younger than he is. Elijah Moore is like what, a month older than Cedric Tillman or something like that. He is barely, like, not even a year older than Jamari Thrash. And just even on that list, 9th or whatever, like, I think the Browns are going to re-sign him, at least to a 1-year deal. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe Elijah Moore is not interested in such a deal. Maybe he wants to get out in the open market and feels like there is something else out there. But I think it makes a lot of sense for the Browns to, one, see what Elijah Moore can do as much as they can, which they are currently doing. He's been pretty solid the last 3 games, just like Tillman and Jerry Jeudy, which, by the way, Cedric Tillman, 24, Jerry Jeudy, 25, Elijah Moore, 24. Like, stop it with the fact that they don't have young talent. It makes no sense. And if we're not developing talent, I don't know what Cedric Tillman is doing. They need to get younger on the offensive line. That is so much of the problem, and getting more functional. And if DeJuan Jones locks down left tackle the way he could, that would be a sign of significant development because he played left tackle on the fly. So the idea that they have not been able to develop draft picks is becoming an insane proposition because you are not watching the team. And like the same point, and again, I will freely admit that I think the Browns should continue to try to add defensive ends until they get that premier guy. But right now, and we're going to see what he's going to do. This is where his opportunity to shine is. Isaiah McGuire has been really good in small samples. I'm very curious to see with more experience what he does. But the combination of Isaiah McGuire and Mike Hall in the last 4 games or whatever they played together has been outstanding. I want them to actually make more plays so that you can get more credit for it. But you go back and watch Mike Hall against Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is spending the entire fourth quarter running away from these guys.
Running away from him, yeah.
I want to see them develop. I want to continue to develop, but I'm absolutely seeing develop. I don't know how much credit Jacques Césaire deserves for what he's doing with the defensive line, but it's hard for me not to give him credit. And I even wrote about it probably a couple of weeks ago, or reminded myself of Jacques Césaire in June when he was asked, are there any other 10-sack guys on this team? And the first name out of his mouth was Isaiah McGuire.
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, oh, he's probably just, he's probably done well and he deserves some credit. Now I'm starting to wonder if he's not right. And obviously he's got a long way to go to get to 10 sacks, but the fact that was the first name out of his mouth is very interesting to me. And I think they saw something in him, as I did when they drafted him. I think he's got the goods, but he's got to go out and prove it. I think Mike Hall has the goods. I think he's got to go out and prove it. But those are really good players. These are young players who are developing right in front of your eyes.
Yeah, and there's a lot more too. We talked about Diabate. I mean, not to mention
he's good.
Yeah,
Diabate is good. I think he will be better. I think he was certainly better when they had JOK on the field. I think he will be certainly helped by having Jordan Hicks out there. I think the combination of Diabate and Devin Bush was a little sketchy, but Diabate's ability is really impressive. He's almost the level of athlete that JOK is, and they got him as an undrafted free agent. Like, he's really exciting. And then, I think so much of this defense, the front seven is really impressive. Yeah. I think this defense would look so much better if we didn't have just the Denzel Ward's 2 mental miscues in coverage. They've got a ton of ability, a lot of young guys on defense. I think people are underestimating how good that's going to be. And because of the fact they are 2-7, and you cannot get away from the fact they are 2-7, it's disappointing. But man, if you can sort of look past that and just watch these guys play, I am really interested to watch these young guys grow, because I think they have a lot of really legit talent that could be special. Again, 2023 draft, solid, really good right now. I think it has a chance to be a franchise changer, and they did it without a first or second round pick.
Yeah, and like you said, you can't get past 2-7, but it isn't always a direct line from talent to record. There's a lot of in between. So.
No, I mean, then it's just the same thing. You look at like some of the other teams that have sucked. Like,
yeah,
the Dallas Cowboys routinely were going 12-4, 12-4, 12-4, and then now they are in a bad way. And again, injuries are such a big part of it. Micah Parsons was out for a number of weeks. DeMarcus Lawrence was out for a number of weeks. Their guards are not playing well, and now Dak Prescott's out for the season. Well, it's a wrap. Like, at that point, and the Browns have run into this situation where, obviously, the Deshaun Watson situation just killed them in a number of ways. But the fact that they have been so injured, and the list of guys who have not missed time on offense due to injury is like 4 guys that actually contribute. So it's a really tough thing to operate through. And I think people, again, when and we've talked about this last week, the old adage, you're never as bad as you think you are when you lose, and you're never as good as you think you are when you win. I think that's true in the fact that the Browns are a 2-7 team that has earned being 2-7. But like, some of the things that have fallen off this year were just entirely unexpected, and some of it was expected. I did not expect Dustin Hopkins to have a historic season 2 years in a row, but it has been sort of surprising just how far he has corrected in the opposite direction, to the point where it has actually hurt them and cost them opportunities in games. Like, you add all these things together, you can see why they end up 2-7 now, and how they can easily get back to being competitive next year. They have to prove that. They have to earn that belief, I suppose, earn that credibility from that standpoint. But like, it's really difficult for me. And I think some of this is the part that I processed my anger on Deshaun Watson 3 years ago, and some people are just getting to it now.
Yeah.
But like, that was, to me, it's been a sunk cost. Like, I've been ready to move on and see what else they can offer at this point. And yeah, the record is no fun, and this year has not been a whole lot of fun, but I do enjoy watching these young guys get better, because there's just a lot to enjoy from that standpoint.
Agreed. You're going to continue to hear this tear down, fire everybody. And I've seen it in the chat and stuff like that. I just still think the shortest point back to relevance and competitive football is been greatly over exaggerated how daunting that task is. So we will see. They have to do it, but there are pieces in place. The defense, to your point, certainly they need to do some things on offense, but they're not overwhelming, tear it down to the studs type things. They're adjust, add, get better, and come back next year.
Brutal slate, but like, let's say the Browns go 4-3 down the stretch, or 3-4. Like, I think you can easily, especially against the teams they're going to have to play, see where this team can get better and can give you reason to believe that they're going to be much better next year. Now, we'll see what happens. I'm not trying to fire anybody either way, but I'm hopeful that they can sort of piece these things together, that they can use the bye week to start getting some momentum. A win against the Saints would certainly be helpful on that front. A beatable team, I don't see any reason, to assume they can't, but they have to do it. And I think the young guys are going to be a huge part of that if they can get it done.
Final question for you tonight, Pete. Do you think Ken Dorsey is back as the OC next year.
Yeah, I don't see any reason he wouldn't be, unless they decide that they are not a good fit together. Again, I look
like a mutual.
Yeah, like they both decide this just isn't working. I really want this coaching staff to stick together. I think people have grossly underestimated. To me, I think they grossly underestimate how much talent is on this coaching staff. And again, you look at the record, I understand why they think the way they do. Yeah. I don't know if Andy Dickerson can coach a lick, but I also can't sit here and go, this was a fair year to evaluate him when he basically had one tackle for part of the summer and has been trying to just stick his finger in various holes of the dam and to plug leaks. And if he can get DeJuan Jones to really lock down that left tackle position, I think at that point you're sitting there going, okay, like I want to see more.
That's a big thing.
Ken Dorsey, I find intriguing. I think Kevin Stefanski is a good balance for him. The offensive line and the quarterback situation make this just so difficult to truly get an evaluation. But then you look at the game against the Ravens and you love some of the stuff you see in that game. Like, if nothing else, going for the kill shot at the end was fantastic. Yeah. I really I know the Browns really like Tommy Rees. I think like what he brings. I like what Nick Charlton brings to the table. I don't know if Deuce Staley is good or not, but I think he brings something that the Browns need, sort of a toughness element that I think can be valuable. I just, Chad O'Shea. So are we going to start giving him credit now, or how's this work? Because I know he's been a guy that a lot of people don't like. I don't know if he's a great coach or not, but I would like to see this group stick together. I like the fact that they're so much younger than the previous staff. I just cannot emphasize how bad that was becoming in terms of the age gap with Stump Mitchell and some of those other guys. They needed to get guys who have been closer to it. Certainly getting two college coaches is certainly helpful, and guys who can communicate with better or more comfortably with players who are entering the league now. I think there's just a benefit to that. So I'm hoping it can work out. Now, ultimately, if Kevin Stefanski determines Coach X needs to go, so be it. That's his call. But I don't want to see the Browns get in a situation where they're forcing everybody out. I don't think they will. I think they will leave it to Kevin Stefanski. So we'll see what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good stuff to react on the OBR streaming network. Make sure you hit like and subscribe on your way in or out. Tell a friend to come on over. Check out the OBR streaming network on youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. We are closing in on 500 subscribers. We need to get there. Do your part and let somebody know. Also, get on over to the OBR.com and sign up for the newsletter so you can get that right in your mailbox, get that content every morning and afternoon, and get all of the content that we're putting out over at the website. So I appreciate all of you tuning in and participating in the chat. You guys make it a great show. I see everything you guys are right. Yep, Dickerson, you're right. That's the one. And any parting words, Pete, before we get out of here tonight?
Subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't. That's an easy way to get everything from the OBR, but there's a lot going on. I wrote about the defense extensively this week. I wrote about the offense extensively last week in terms of needs and where I think the defensive needs have actually decreased. Obviously, I wrote about Elijah Moore, and then, Jacob Roach and Sam Penix have combined to do a project. They released the first article today on quarterbacks. Certainly, my opinions may differ from theirs, but I will certainly be consuming what they have to see their evaluation of it. I'm a little more hardline than they are, but nevertheless, you got tier one quarterbacks today. At some point, I think in all they're going to look at 15 quarterbacks between them, with film and all that other stuff. So check that out.
Yeah, really good stuff there from them and everybody else over at the OBR. So keep it locked. Don't go anywhere. I'll be putting out the weekly schedule so we know every time shows are at all week, because we're doing shows 5 nights a week, multiple shows on a couple nights. So there's plenty of content to be taken in from the OBR. Once again, hit like and subscribe. Follow Pete on Twitter @_Pete Smith _. My name is Brad Ward. For everybody at the OBR, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful